Okay, let's get into it. We're going to unpack a film that really did change things, not just for science fiction, but for action movies as a whole. 1986's Aliens.
That's right. And we're not just here to, retell the plot. We want to dig into the background. Our whole focus today is on peeling back the layers, the difficult production, its cultural impact, the legacy, that iconic cast.
And really, why its core theme still feels so relevant, maybe even more so today.
Exactly. It's a film that resonates so strongly almost 40 years later.
And when you look at the final film, it's just amazing how successful it was, especially when our sources show it was made on a surprisingly tight budget.
It was about $18.5 million, which is incredible when you consider it went on to make somewhere between $131 $183 million worldwide. It was an instant blockbuster.
A huge success.
It is, and it's such a remarkable story in film history, particularly because it pulled it off by completely switching genres. I mean, the original Alien from 1979, that was pure slow burn horror.
A haunted house in space, basically.
A perfect description. But Aliens just pivots so sharply into military sci-fi action. And that tension, that blend of intense action with really deep character work, all centered on Ellen Ripley. That's the triumph that made it a legend.
So despite how big a hit the first film was, this sequel wasn't an immediate green light. It actually took years to get going, which seems kind of absurd by today's standards. What was the holdup?
Well, you had a couple of major hurdles that kept the project stuck in development for most of the early 80s. The first was just sheer skepticism from the studio, 20th Century Fox.
Skepticism after the success of Alien.
Right. The sources say that while the original studio president was on board, his replacement had serious doubts. A lot of the executives seemed to think the original success was just a fluke.
Lightning in a bottle.
Exactly. They were worried a sequel would cost too much and just be a financial disaster.
That really shows a lack of understanding of where the sci-fi and horror markets were heading in the 80s.
It does. And on top of that industry blindness, there was a nasty legal battle. Brandywine Productions, that's David Geller, Walter Hill, and Gordon Carroll, they had to sue Fox.
For what?
For unpaid profits from the first film. Fox was using, creative accounting to claim the movie was a financial loss, even though it grossed over $100 million.
That whole concept of Hollywood accounting is it's always shocking to hear how a massive hit can be declared unprofitable on paper.
It is. And it meant the creators weren't getting paid what they were owed. That whole legal fight stalled any real development on a sequel until the lawsuit finally got settled in early 1983.
And that settlement was the key.
It was. It secured the money to develop the sequel, but it didn't even guarantee distribution. That's how cautious Fox still was.
Which sets the stage perfectly for James Cameron's entrance. I mean, this is one of those great Hollywood stories of seizing an opportunity. How did he, a director with basically one real film credit, get the job?
Yeah.
It was really a mix of perfect timing and pure audacity. In mid-1983, a new executive was finally open to the sequel idea. His development guy read a script for a low-budget action film called The Terminator.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So based on that script, they asked Cameron to write up a treatment for the Alien sequel. He took this simple idea, Ripley and soldiers, and apparently wrote the entire 42-page treatment in just 3 days.
3 days. To lay out the structure for a film like that it's just staggering.
The treatment was strong, but the studio was still, cautious. Some executives apparently thought it was just a constant stream of horror without character development.
So what changed their minds?
The Terminator.
Yeah.
It came out in late 1984 and was this huge surprise hit, critically and financially. It proved Cameron could handle action, sci-fi, and complex effects on a tight budget.
And that one success just catapulted him past his previous film, the very low-budget Piranha II, The Spawning.
Right into the director's chair for Aliens. It's a textbook case of proving what you can do.
And his creative vision was so clear, he wasn't trying to copy Ridley Scott.
Not at all. That was the genius of it. He and the producer, Gail Ann Hurd, decided to combine the psychological terror of Alien with the kind of intense action they'd just perfected on The Terminator.
He had that famous quote about it, didn't he?
He did. He said, if the first film was a haunted attraction, Aliens was designed to be a roller coaster, moving the audience from dread to pure exhilaration.
And that meant bringing back Ellen Ripley. Cameron has said he wrote the script staring at a picture of Sigourney Weaver. He just knew it had to be her.
That vision was essential, but actually putting it into practice, That was almost a disaster. The film was shot at Pinewood Studios in England, and it led to this huge culture clash.
Right. The sources describe it as a tumultuous filming environment. It seems like the friction was really about Cameron's intense pace hitting a wall with the more traditional British film industry.
That's it, exactly. Cameron was used to the American model where every second on set is money. You just move, move, move. He really struggled with the mandated tea breaks.
The tea breaks.
Yes. They were traditional in the UK industry, and they could stop production for up to an hour every day. For Cameron, he just felt like he was losing precious shooting time.
And given Cameron's reputation for being very hands-on, very demanding, I can imagine how that went over with a union crew who might have seen him as this upstart newcomer.
It got bad, fast. Some accounts describe him as aggressive, uncompromising. He would just go in and adjust the lighting himself without talking to the union crew, who were already pretty dismissive of him. They didn't think he'd earned the director's chair.
So that created a pretty toxic environment on set.
It escalated to a near mutiny. The crew thought he was inexperienced. The cinematographer Dick Bush got fired because he insisted on lighting the Alien Hive set too brightly, which went against what Cameron wanted.
He wanted it darker, moodier.
Right. And then the first assistant director was also fired for repeatedly ignoring instructions. At that point, the Pinewood crew just staged a walkout in the middle of a shoot.
Wow, that is a huge disruption on a tight schedule. How did they get things back under control?
Cameron and Hurd gathered everyone for a very direct, very confrontational talk. Cameron basically laid it all out, explained how important the project was, and told anyone who couldn't commit to the pace and the vision that they should just leave.
But they did offer a compromise.
Right, they did. Crucially, they agreed to respect the scheduled working hours. It was a small concession, but it was enough to get the production back on track.
The relationship was still pretty fractured, though. There's that famous and very harsh quote Cameron reportedly left them with at the end of the shoot.
Yes. He reportedly told the crew the only thing that kept him going was knowing he would drive out the gate of Pinewood and never come back, while they would. Well, he used some very strong words to describe them. He called most of them lazy, insolent, and arrogant.
That really speaks to how intense the friction was.
It does, but it's important to add the counterpoint here. While Cameron had that view, Bill Paxton, who played Hudson, saw it differently. He thought the British crew's work was impeccable, but they just had a much more relaxed, union-based approach to time.
So it wasn't incompetence, just a fundamental clash of work cultures.
Exactly. But what that friction did create was an incredibly disciplined set once they got past the walkout. Every minute counted. And you see that discipline in the final film. It stayed on budget, on time, and finished shooting in early 1986.
That tension on the technical side is such a sharp contrast to the emotional core of the film, which is that ensemble cast, especially the Colonial Marines. But before we get to them, we have to talk about getting Sigourney Weaver back as Ripley.
That negotiation was a whole power struggle in itself. Fox was really hesitant to bring her back. Her agent knew her value, and they were afraid she'd ask for too much money and sink the budget.
And Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd knew that without Ripley, the whole film just falls apart.
They were so determined that Ripley had to be the solo star that when Fox pushed back, they actually quit the project. It was a strategic move to force the studio's hand. A huge bluff. They even called Arnold Schwarzenegger's agent and sort of hinted they might have to write Ripley out of the movie, knowing that word would get back to Weaver's agent almost immediately.
That is some serious Hollywood brinksmanship.
It worked. Weaver came back, and she got $1 million, her highest salary at the time, plus a percentage of the profits. But the sources are clear. She needed Cameron to personally assure her it wasn't just a cash grab. She wanted to know the character's depth would be respected.
Once she was on board, the next challenge was building that cohesive unit of Colonial Marines and doing it fast. How did Cameron do that?
Through intense preparation, he had the Marine actors go through 3 weeks of grueling training with the British Special Air Service, the SAS.
And they had real-world expertise there too, right?
Yeah.
Al Matthews, who played Sergeant Apone.
He was a real-life Vietnam War veteran. He helped train the other actors on how to handle firearms, how to carry themselves like real soldiers.
So that training wasn't just about learning to hold a gun.
No, it was central to Cameron's whole method. It created this genuine camaraderie among the Marine actors, and crucially, the sources say the training deliberately treated the other main actors, Weaver, Paul Reiser, William Hope, as outsiders.
Which immediately creates that on-screen dynamic. The Marines are their own tight-knit group, and the civilians are well, civilians.
Precisely. Cameron also had them read Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers to really get that Space Marine archetype, and he created detailed backstories for every single Marine character. That's why they feel so real, even the ones with only a few lines.
Let's talk about some of those Marines. Private Hudson, played by the late, great Bill Paxton.
Paxton's casting was a total chance encounter. He ran into Cameron at the LA airport. Hudson is that perfect archetype, the guy who's all bravado until things get real, and then he just completely panics. Paxton said he knew his character was the comic relief, the voice for the audience's terror.
And his most famous line, "Game over, man, game over."
Yeah.
That wasn't just improvised on the spot, was it? It came from that backstory Cameron insisted on.
That's right. It came from a backstory Paxton developed where Hudson had spent most of his time in simulators. So for him, when things went wrong, the first thought would be that flashing sign, game over. It was improvisation, but grounded in character.
Then you have Corporal Hicks, played by Michael Biehn. He was a very late addition to this group.
A last-minute replacement. James Remar was originally cast, but was fired shortly after filming started due to a drug possession arrest. So Biehn came in late, missed all that special training, and had to wear Remar's custom-fitted armor.
That must have been tough.
It was, but despite missing that bonding period, Biehn quickly formed a strong relationship with the rest of the cast offset, and you can see that chemistry on screen.
And then there's Private Vasquez, played by Jeanette Goldstein. She became an instant icon of female strength. Her commitment to that role sounds incredible.
It really was. Cameron asked her to gain 10 pounds of muscle for the role, and she did it. She had no prior film experience, but her intensity was just perfect. Now, her portrayal has been discussed a lot over the years.
In what way?
Well, the sources state she wore dark contact lenses and makeup to darken her skin to portray a Chicano character. She also studied interviews with Mexican-American gang members for her accent and her demeanor.
Right, so that portrayal, while iconic for its strength, does raise some questions today about representation.
It absolutely does. The discussion at the time was more focused on the physicality. The filmmakers felt they needed an actress with her build and that raw intensity. Goldstein herself said she was unrecognizable on film. But the fact remains, she delivered this powerful, complex vision of strength that just blew away the typical action hero of the time.
Shifting to the film's emotional anchors, we have the new found family, Newt and Bishop.
Carrie Henn, who played Newt, was a total discovery. They scouted her at her school in England. She had no acting experience, but Cameron cast her because she had this great face and expressive eyes. And Newt's presence is what drives Ripley's entire transformation from a survivor into a protector.
And they took real care to make that bond feel authentic. I read that Weaver and Paxton would spend time between scenes just coloring with her.
They did, just creating a safe, comfortable space for her amidst a very difficult shoot. And then you have Bishop, the android, played by Lance Henriksen. Ripley starts the film with this deep and totally justified distrust of synthetics because of Ash in the first film.
So how did Henriksen's performance win her over and win the audience over?
He intentionally played Bishop as an innocent child, someone who almost pities humans for being so short-lived. This really subtle, almost naive performance directly counters Ripley's trauma. And his big moment is when he volunteers for that incredibly dangerous mission to pilot the dropship remotely. He says, "I may be synthetic, but I'm not stupid."
That's such a great line.
It's brilliant because it gives this artificial character a level of humanity and integrity that the human corporate guy, Burke, completely lacks.
The lasting impact of Aliens is so tied to its technical brilliance as well. Cameron deliberately avoided the established special effects houses. Why did he make that choice?
He wanted a fresh approach. By managing his own smaller 40-person team, led by the legendary Stan Winston, he got total hands-on control. He didn't want to be tied to the style of the original Alien crew. He wanted everything to feel new, but also grounded.
And that grounded utilitarian look really defined the Colonial Marines. These futuristic designs feel so functional, so lived in.
That was the whole philosophy. Sid Mead designed the Sulaco spaceship not as a sleek warship, but as a commercial freighter that was just carrying a military unit. It had to look tough and practical. The famous Armored Personnel Carrier, the APC, is a masterpiece of this idea. It was built over a real-world vehicle,
What was it?
a Boeing 747 pushback tug. They disguised it so well. And that use of real vehicles made the whole setting feel so much more authentic.
And the weapons became instantly iconic.
Yeah.
There weren't elegant sci-fi ray guns. There were these heavy, brutal-looking tools.
They were famously kit-bashed, which means they were built by combining parts from existing military hardware. The smart gun, which was mounted on a Steadicam rig, weighed about 65 to 70 pounds. The pulse rifle was a mix of a machine gun and shotgun parts, all put inside this futuristic shell.
It's well known that Sigourney Weaver was a bit hesitant about her character using these weapons so aggressively.
She was. She was generally opposed to Ripley being so heavily armed, but Cameron convinced her by arguing that the weapons were secondary to the story of protecting Newt. The rifle was just a tool for that, not a symbol of aggression for its own sake.
But the props themselves were a real challenge for her.
Oh, absolutely. They were so heavy that she struggled with them during filming. It required a lot of rehearsal. They even had to build a special lightweight dummy of Newt for her to carry during the big action scenes so she wouldn't be completely overburdened.
That attention to physical detail is so key. Now let's turn to the creatures themselves. Stan Winston had to evolve the xenomorph from the single terrifying monster of the first film into a whole swarm of warrior aliens.
Right. H.R. Geiger wasn't available, so Winston stepped in. Cameron's direction was that the new aliens had to be all about movement and speed, like a perfect military adversary. So Winston used dancers and stuntmen in these lightweight suits, often filming them on wires to make their movement seem inhuman and incredibly fast.
And considering the hordes you see on screen, it's amazing how few suits they actually had.
They only had 12 full alien suits for the entire movie. It was all just clever camera work, fast cutting, and sound design to make it feel like there were hundreds of them.
And the true innovation, the creature that dominates the film's finale, the alien queen.
The queen was Cameron's own creation, biologically speaking. He based the idea on a beehive hierarchy. He took Geiger's design principles and just scaled them up into this massive, fast, and very female creature. He described her as hideous and beautiful at the same time.
Building that thing on a 1986 budget must have been an engineering nightmare.
It was a mechanical marvel. The queen was a 14-foot-tall puppet made mostly from lightweight polyurethane foam to keep it manageable. But operating it required this huge hidden crew. You had 2 people inside the torso just to control the arms.
Inside it?
Inside it. And then up to 4 more technicians were needed to control the head with a complex system of servo motors and hydraulics. Using hydraulics like that for such large, articulated movements was brand new for Stan Winston's studio. It's what gave the Queen's head and jaw that terrifying, realistic speed.
The final battle, of course, hinges on Ripley using the power loader.
Another incredible piece of practical engineering. The power loader was an exosuit controlled from behind by a stuntman in a black skin suit, which made the whole thing incredibly heavy and difficult to move. Because both the Queen and the power loader were so large and unwieldy, that final fight had to be choreographed down to the second to avoid serious injuries.
And they used some other clever techniques for the more difficult shots of the Queen, right?
They did. They used miniatures and a technique called go motion for some sequences. It's essentially stop motion, moving the puppet frame by frame, but with motion blur added in. It gave the miniature a sense of speed that you don't get with standard stop motion, making the Queen seem much faster and more menacing in the long shots.
It's just incredible what they accomplished, practically. But speaking of difficult things, let's talk about the final major conflict of the production. The music score, which was notoriously rushed.
The composer, James Horner, called his experience on Aliens a nightmare. He'd worked with Cameron before and expected a 6-week schedule to write the score, but Cameron was still filming and editing, so Horner was left with only 3 weeks.
That is an impossible time frame for a full orchestral score, especially for an action movie of this scale.
Horner was literally writing music overnight for some of the biggest scenes, including the final battle. The pressure was immense, and it all came to a head because Cameron delivered the final cut of the film so late that the first time he heard the finished music was while the London Symphony Orchestra was recording it.
So the director is hearing the final score for the first time as it's being recorded.
At Abbey Road Studios, no less. And Cameron, reportedly, he disliked it. Since they couldn't just re-record everything, Cameron ended up cutting the score to pieces in post-production. He even inserted bits of Jerry Goldsmith's score from the original Alien and hired other composers to fill in gaps.
So a lot of the music we hear in those big action scenes isn't what Horner originally wrote for them.
Correct. Cameron later admitted the music was good, but he felt it just didn't fit the way he had edited the scenes. Ironically, Horner's now famous Alien Sting sound, that sound that builds all the tension, was something Cameron initially rejected. The silver lining for Horner was that the unused parts of his score were later repurposed for another action classic, Die Hard.
If the production stories are about how they made the film, the themes are why it has lasted. And Aliens makes this fundamental shift from personal survival to this intense psychological exploration of motherhood.
This is the absolute emotional core of the sequel. The relationship between Ripley and Newt is everything. And what makes it so powerful, something that was only really clear in the special edition, is the scene where Ripley learns her own daughter died of old age while she was in cryostasis for 57 years. That loss grounds her entire character.
And it explains the immediate fierceness of her connection to Newt, who has also lost her entire family. They form this new, desperate family unit, a selfless motherhood that's put in direct contrast with its monstrous reflection, the alien queen.
The Queen is such an intentional, terrifying counterpart to Ripley. They're both single mothers defending their young. But the Queen is portrayed as this mindless, unchecked maternal instinct, this uncontrolled proliferation. Her only focus is laying eggs, even as her entire colony is being destroyed.
Which is the complete opposite of Ripley, who is willing to sacrifice her own life for Newt's survival.
And the whole alien life cycle just taints the idea of reproduction itself. You have creation through violation, birth through violent death. So when Ripley destroys the Queen and her eggs, she's rejecting that entire horrific cycle. It elevates the film beyond just a military shoot 'em up into this powerful commentary on nature, nurture, and the moral responsibility of creation.
The film also pioneered the modern female action hero. Ripley was famously compared to the hypermasculine heroes of the time, even getting the nickname Rambolina.
This was revolutionary. Cameron was very intentional about it. He wanted a female protagonist who was capable of extreme action but still retained these distinct protective feminine traits. He needed to remove the typical male protectors to force her to fend for herself. It was powerful thematically but also smart business, as the industry was finally realizing that about half the action movie audience was female.
And the climax of the film is the ultimate realization of that choice. Ripley defeats the Queen by herself.
Absolutely. She completely transcends the usual gender roles. She takes command and she wins, specifically because all the key male characters are neutralized. Hicks is injured, Burke is gone. She uses her intelligence, her maternal rage, and the great technological equalizer, the power loader.
And to balance Ripley's more maternal brand of action, you have the hypermasculine counterpoint in Private Vasquez.
Exactly. The short hair, the muscular physique, the aggressive attitude. Cameron made sure the film presented a whole spectrum of powerful female expression.
Beyond gender and family, the film works as this powerful piece of social commentary, widely seen as an allegory for the Vietnam War.
The parallels are so striking, and they're intentional. You see the colonial Marines with all their superior weaponry and their overconfidence, and they're just completely ineffective against this unseen local enemy that knows the terrain. It's a direct reflection of the American military experience in Vietnam. Their technology is ultimately useless.
And Ripley herself is the anchor for this war trauma narrative, isn't she?
She is. She's suffering from profound post-traumatic stress disorder after the first film. And this movie is, in many ways, about her confronting that trauma to get closure. She has to go back into the dark to save her soul.
This allegory also extends to a deep mistrust of corporatism, which was a huge theme in 80s cinema.
Absolutely. In the post-Vietnam era, the military was shown as fallible. In Aliens, the Marines are often out of their depth. But the real villain is the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, personified by Carter Burke. He's the ultimate self-interested opportunist, willing to sacrifice human lives for company profit for a biological weapon.
Burke is almost more insidious than the xenomorphs because his evil is a choice. It isn't just instinct.
That is the critical distinction. He's the complete opposite of Ripley, who consistently prioritizes human life over any corporate directive. The film makes a clear statement. The individual's moral compass will ultimately triumph over the failure of institutions, whether it's the military or the soulless corporation.
The combination of that technical innovation and the profound themes really ensured Aliens achieved cinematic history. It's consistently ranked as one of the greatest sci-fi, action, and sequel films ever made.
It's in that very rare category of a sequel that many people consider equal to or even better than the original. The British Film Institute called it a matriarchal masterpiece and a masterclass in action direction.
And its critical respectability was cemented by a truly groundbreaking milestone for the science fiction genre that year.
That would be Sigourney Weaver's Oscar nomination for Best Actress. It was basically unheard of the first time an actor was nominated in a lead category for a science fiction film. It proved the genre could be taken seriously for its dramatic depth.
And while she didn't win, The film did take home 2 Academy Awards.
It did, for its technical achievements, Best Sound Effects Editing and Best Visual Effects.
Beyond the awards, Aliens also created a cinematic formula that has been copied endlessly ever since.
The whole structure, a squad of arrogant soldiers getting systematically taken apart by an overwhelming villain, that's become a standard cliché in action films and video games for decades. James Horner's score was just as influential. That heavy, percussive sound and the signature alien sting became the default sound for action movie trailers for years.
And the sheer quotability of this film has just let it seep into pop culture at every level.
Oh, absolutely. Bill Paxton's line, "Game over, man, game over," is now shorthand for total disaster. And Sigourney Weaver's challenge to the Queen, "Get away from her, you bitch," is universally recognized as the ultimate expression of protective fury.
The film's success also blew the Alien series up into this massive franchise.
Cameron's vision expanded the world so much. He introduced the Alien Queen, the hierarchy, the colonial marines. This world building led to a huge expansion action figures from Kenner and NECA, which even recently released figures for Newt and Burke.
And it wasn't just limited to toys.
Not at all. Dark Horse Comics started publishing comic books, which led to the famous Alien vs. Predator crossovers. The franchise became a cornerstone of video games, starting almost immediately in 1986. Even fashion got in on it. Years later, Reebok released Ripley's custom laceless sneakers.
But that legacy cast a very long shadow, making the sequels notoriously difficult. The next film, Alien 3, sparked huge controversy.
It was seen as a massive betrayal by many fans. The sources confirmed that the decision in the 1992 sequel to kill off Hicks and Newt off-screen was widely criticized. James Cameron himself called it a huge slap in the face to the fans, because the entire emotional point of Aliens was Ripley finding a new family.
And the fallout was so bad that Michael Biehn, who played Hicks, refused to even let them use his likeness in Alien 3. He felt it was disrespectful to the characters.
That refusal just speaks volumes about the bonds that were forged during that difficult production. Cameron always understood that the film's success rested on the audience's emotional connection to those characters he'd built up, not just the action.
And that connection really endures. Many of the cast and crew reunited for the 30th anniversary in 2016.
They did. Weaver, Bean, Paxton, Henriksen, Reiser, and Hurd were all there. And at that event, Cameron repeated his core belief, crediting the film's popularity to those relatable human characters. He said, "We can all relate to Hudson running around asking, 'What the heck are we going to do now, man?' We all know that guy." That recognition of relatable human panic is what makes the film timeless.
It's clear that Aliens made its mark not just through action or special effects, but through its thematic depth, its groundbreaking female hero, and its enduring critique of unchecked corporate power. The film's lasting power really rests on the shoulders of its characters and the family they forged under fire.
And as you reflect on the film, maybe consider how that central power struggle between an individual's moral imperative, like Ripley, and a corporation's ruthless opportunism, like Burke, is perhaps even more relevant now in our world of global corporate influence than it was back in 1986.
A very compelling thought to leave with.
Thanks for listening.